Hi guys, happy Thursday. We're reading, oh, hold on. I didn't plug in that microphone, so sorry guys. These episodes, these readings are extremely unscripted, so I appreciate your grace. We're going to get started into Genesis chapter 35, King James and the Message version. I guess like a little recap though from 34, that was that whole thing with Dinah and the defiling, and then the brothers getting this revenge by slaughtering the whole city and all of this big mess. And Jacob being really scared that something's going to happen to him now because of the people in the land of Canaan, like what they're going to think of him and if they might retaliate based on what his sons did. But anyway, that was chapter 34. This is Genesis chapter 35 of the King James Version in the Message. I'm going to jump into the King James Version right now. And here we go. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said to his household, and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean. Change your garments. Let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God. Who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak tree which was by Shechem. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them. And they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. So Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people that were with him. And he built there an altar and called the palace El Bethel, because there God appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak. And the name of it was called Elon Bachuth. But God appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Padan Aram, and blessed him. And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob, thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and the kings shall come out of thy loins, and the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee, and I will give the land. And God went up from him in the place where he talked with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone. And he poured a drink offering therein, and he poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake to him, Bethel. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath. And Rachel traveled, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni. But his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way of Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar upon her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Rachel journeyed and spread his tent. Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Edar. It came to pass, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Yikes. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin. And the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad and Asher. And these are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Paddan Aram. And Jacob came unto Isaac, his father, unto Memrah, unto the city of Arba, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. And the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old, full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. I'm going to move right into the message. This is Genesis chapter 35 of the Message. God spoke to Jacob, Go back to Bethel, stay there and build an altar to the God who revealed himself to you when you were running for your life from your brother Esau. Jacob told his family and all those who lived with him, Throw out all the alien gods which you have. Take a good bath and put on clean clothes. We're going to Bethel. I'm going to build an altar there to the God who answered me when I was in trouble and has stuck with me everywhere I've gone since. They turned over to Jacob all the alien gods they'd been holding on to, along with their Lucky Charm earrings. Jacob buried them under the oak tree in Shechem. Then they set out. A paralyzing fear descended on all the surrounding villages, so that they were unable to pursue the sons of Jacob. Jacob and his company arrived at Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. He built an altar there and named it El Bethel, God of Bethel, because that's where God revealed himself to him when he was running from his brother. And that's when Rebekah's nurse, Deborah, died. She was buried just below Bethel under the oak tree. It was named Elon Bechuth, Weeping Oak. God revealed himself once again to Jacob after he'd gone back from Paddan Aram and blessed him. Your name is Jacob, Heel. But that's your name no longer. From now on, your name is Israel. God wrestler. God continued. I am the strong God. Have children flourish. A nation, a whole company of nations will come from you. Kings will come from your loins, and the land I give Abraham and Isaac, I now give you. I pass it on to your descendants. And then God was gone, ascended from the place where he had spoken with him. Jacob set up a stone pillar, on the spot where God had spoken to him. He poured a drink offering on it and anointed it with oil. Jacob dedicated the place where God had spoken with him, Bethel, God's house. They left Bethel. They were still quite a ways from Ephrath when Rachel went into labor, hard labor. When her labor pains were at the worst, the midwife said to her, "Don't be afraid. You'll have another boy." With her last breath, for she was now dying, she named him Ben-Oni, son of my pain. But his father named him Benjamin, son of good fortune. Rachel died and was buried on the road to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Jacob set up a pillar to mark her grave. It is still there today, Rachel's gravestone. Israel kept on his way and set up camp at Migdal Eder. While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah. And Israel heard of what he did. There were 12 sons of Jacob, the sons by Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, the sons of Rachel, Joseph, Benjamin, the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid, Dan, Naphtali, the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maid, Gad, Asher. These were Jacob's sons, born to him in Padan Aram. Finally, Jacob made it back home to his father, Isaac, at Memrah in Kiriath Arba, present-day Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had lived. Isaac was now 180 years old. He breathed his last breath and died, an old man full of years. He was buried with his family by his sons, Esau and Jacob. That's the end of chapter 35. There's a lot of people dying in this chapter, and it's kind of depressing a little bit. First the handmaid, Rachel's handmaid Deborah, then Rachel giving birth, and then his father, Isaac. That's a whole lot going on. Plus he's moving around. Because of all that stuff that just happened in the previous chapter, he had to leave. But also it says in the very first verse, "And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, and appear unto thee when thou fleetest from the face of Esau thy brother." I keep laughing at that because it's just, to me, it's a very funny, ridiculous story. But as human beings, we just do ridiculous things, make ridiculous situations. It's just silly. Most of the time what we do is just absolutely ridiculous and immature and just a mess. Don't know how to handle things ever without God. Even the most confident people who reject God, they're the ones that handle things the worst because they don't have any direction or anyone to tell them how to do it right. They're just doing it based on what they think is right, which is usually wrong. It's a really interesting chapter. There's a lot of obedience going on, especially I think because Jacob is fearing what will happen to him because of what his sons did in the previous chapter. It starts immediately with God, because God wasn't really in the last chapter at all. Aside from the fact that, no one was really acknowledging him, but what I noticed was he is there, but he's not really mentioned by the people there. And his word still reigns true. Jacob and his family is not going to die. Because there's a promise, there's a word and a promise from God that's been reiterated 3 generations now, and it has to come to pass. Everything that God says always comes to pass. I can vouch for it, and I've got a really big one coming that he's doing right now. So it's really interesting. God's immediately in this chapter 35 of the very first verse, giving instructions for him to go now. He has to migrate, probably for his safety, but also for several other reasons. His father's about to die, and I mean, obviously Jacob doesn't know that, but God knows that. And on top of that, he's sending him back to the place that he went when he originally fled more than 20, who knows how many years it is at this point that he did that. A few decades for sure. So he's sending him back there. And the first thing I noticed reading this, when he was sending him back, even though Jacob was like afraid of people hurting him, even though he's got this promise and stuff, and I get it, man, it's hard to have faith when like it looks like the odds are against you, but God is the creator. Whatever he wants to happen is going to happen. It doesn't matter who is standing in your way and how strong they think they are. God will pluck them out, like he just will, and I can vouch for that. I can vouch for a lot of things that he does. I mean, there's a verse, and I'm probably going to have to find it before I close this out, but there's a verse about man making plans, but God's plans are the real plans. It doesn't matter what plans you make. If God says something's gonna be, there ain't nothing you can do about it. So it's just really interesting that even though he was afraid, and had forgotten the promise that was made, which basically guarantees his life and the life of his family, God is... While Jacob and his family, his little tribe, his clan, while they're sojourning, I guess is kind of what they said here, while he's going and he's traveling, no one's touching them. It says in verse 5, and they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were around them. And they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. Like God, his word has to come to pass. It doesn't even matter that necessarily what they did wasn't even right. Because, I mean, there's a consequence coming to some of these guys anyway, these sons. But it isn't going to be to kill them. So, in reality, it's just really interesting. As afraid as Jacob was and forgetting the promise, God still, we can see here, had his back. His word is reigning true, despite everything that's happened. And people having human moments, I guess. And before that, I think this is also something that's interesting, is God is, let me see. He tells him to go, and it says in verse 2, I'm just staying in the early part of this for some reason, but there's just some really cool little nuggets here that, if for food for thought for your own life when you're making some decisions. But it says... in verse 2, then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. Let us arise and go up to Bethel. I will make an altar unto God, who answered me the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. I mean, he's just showing his loyalty to God, I think. Again, here's another one, third generation in. Jacob is matured, from the trickster he used to be. And getting tricked, I'm sure, played into that. But just also his relationship with God. And, he's human, so he's having some moments. But he's definitely a man of God. He could hear God. God is coming and talking to him, giving him directions. And, I mean, he's appearing before him several times. I'm not really sure in what form he's seeing him. I mean, one was that man he wrestled. He was like wrestling Jesus or something. I don't know. The guys, it was God for sure. He said he saw his face, the face of God. So, I'm not really sure the intricacies of that. I would love to hear somebody else's elaboration. I'm probably going to research this stuff later on after this. But he sees God, he talks with God, God appears to him on several occasions and gives him instructions, and Jacob's following suit. On top of that, he's trying to cover his tracks too. He's trying not to leave like any portals open right now for, evil to come into his life. So he's getting rid of all these... I don't even know what you call it. It says strange gods, but it's obviously like some material objects or something that aren't really gods. You can see the lowercase g in verse 2. They're not gods. They're just things that people put on a pedestal that they believe it will give them power, and it doesn't give them any power. It's like so many things we do nowadays, like New Age stuff, or like physical idols and things, and people like praying to them or believing in them. Even when it comes to quote unquote Christianity, people will have like statues of Mary and pray to it as if like Mary's gonna bless you. Mary's dead, guys. Mary isn't God. Mary is just a person like you and me. She's not to be praised. That's really, and I don't mean to like come down on like some beliefs that variation, but I mean, even if you read that Bible based on that belief, because they have a pretty similar Bible, that Bible doesn't say praise Mary at all. It doesn't say anything about her being godlike and being someone worthy of being prayed to and things. The only one that you're supposed to be praying to is the creator of this world, which is God. And I don't know. I think when it comes to strange gods, they're talking about these physical items or things that people try to create worth or something out of, but it's a no God. And you'll hear God saying that at some point. He says it several times in this, probably earlier on. We're in Genesis. He might say it in Genesis. He for sure is going to probably say it in Exodus. These no gods, that's what he calls them, because it's just, I can't even imagine how annoying that must be. Human beings just being ridiculous and, putting so much value into an object, a thing that was made by a man. It just doesn't make sense. If it was made by a man, it's certainly not a god of any of us. It's just, it was made by one of us. So I don't know. It's just really interesting. He tells them to put away the strange gods, and apparently they follow suit. They get rid of, they give him all this stuff, which is really interesting. Why did they even have all of this in the first place? Is it because of these people from the land of Canaan from last chapter that they looted from? Was it like their gods and things were in there? Was it just because they were in the land of Canaan and they got influenced by things? It doesn't really say where these things came from. But it's been years, and a lot of the sons are old enough. They're men at this point. Even if they're young men, they're men, because the oldest one is sleeping with the concubine, so he's old enough to do that. He's a grown man. And so who knows how long they've been here and under what influences that they've gathered. I mean, even in the last chapter, Dinah's out exploring, the women of the country. So I'm sure she wasn't the only one that did that over the years and got influenced, probably. He buries all of that stuff, though. He gets rid of it before they go. And I just think all of this stuff is super important because, honestly, there's some really interesting video by a pastor. I'll probably have to put a link down below. But he's a really cool, interesting pastor. I won't say that I agree with everything that any pastor says, but this pastor in particular, and I think he's passed away, rest in peace, but I think he definitely was a man of God, and he talked about portals, demonic portals, and they're real, guys. I mean, when I say I can vouch for so many things, it's true. I won't say I tested it, but I've been through the process of some of this where I was able to see that it was true. And one thing that you can do to prevent those demonic portals from being part of your life that just brings evil, it could even bring people who are just evil for no reason towards you. Those portals can easily be closed by, for one, your relationship with God. Because if you're in a relationship with God, you're not going to be opening portals in the first place. You're going to be living a decent, good life, as best as you can. It's not going to be perfect, but it's not going to be the kind that's purposefully inviting evil. And one thing that is, and I recommend doing exactly what Jacob just did here, is if you have anything in your house or just of your quote-unquote belongings that is not of God, and you'll know, you can ask God and he'll show you. He'll convict you in your spirit. He's done it with me many times. Sometimes you don't even know that the thing that you have is not of God because, you're just normalized with the world and the world says it's okay. But when you're walking with God and you actually genuinely ask him about if they, whatever, please show me whatever, if I have anything here that's not of you and that should be out the door in the trash, he will tell you right away, he will show you. And if he doesn't tell you right away, pretty soon he will. He won't really hesitate and, take forever to tell you. You'll be convicted. You'll really, you'll grasp it. It could be books. It could be really any kind of object. It could be idols, like here. It could be things that, are of some quote unquote spiritual sense, but it's like a false spiritual, like tarot cards or new age stuff in general. Psychics and all of this weird stuff, like that's just all like a bunch of witchcraft, and it just opens the door for a lot of really messed up things to happen. And I mean, I've known people who've practiced witchcraft and known of people who've done it, and they like think that it's worked, but it always backfires. And then you have to think about it. Just don't even practice this stuff, like any of that new age and tarot card stuff. Don't do it, because it will come back to you, even if you're predicting or putting or cursing or whatever you think you're doing to somebody else, especially if that person is a child of God and they're following God. That's not somebody you want to be putting hexes on, because it's going to come back. And then on top of that, God is going to bring his vengeance on you, which is the worst one. And then you got to deal with Satan's coming to collect. He never gives y'all nothing free. So be careful when you're doing that dark stuff, man, because it's going to hurt you. And this is something that stands out to me in this chapter is like Jacob immediately got rid of all that stuff. He wasn't playing around at that point. His sons had already made this bad situation. He had to get out of it. So he was just trying to clean the slate. God is obviously still with him and giving him instructions, and he's going with it. It's not really too much else I have to say about this, except that his wife died giving birth to the 12th son, which was Benjamin, but it said his name was Ben-Ami, which it had something to do with him being, let me see what the definition of that, what it said in one of these versions. His name, Ben-Oni, son of my pain, because she died giving birth to him. It was a hard labor. That's how she spent her final hours, man. Giving birth to her precious little son there that she didn't get to know, except maybe him coming out. And at that point she died. It said her soul left her body. She named him Ben-Ami, probably one of her last words. Yeah, she was dying. It says in verse 18. I'm going back to the King James Version really fast. Verse 18, it says, and it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni. Then it says right after that, but his father called him Benjamin. So he renamed him, and at first for a minute I kind of forgot what those names meant. And I'm like, why is he renaming it? But it's a good thing that he did that, because, I mean, his name, it's better. It's that Ben-Oni means like son of my pain. He renamed him Benjamin. He still kept the Ben in from the mom, which is very sweet. You can see that he really valued that she named him. But, she named him dying in pain. So she gave him kind of a weird, little messed up name. And so he renamed him Benjamin, which is son of good fortune, not son of my pain. Son of good fortune, which is a better name. Be careful what you name your kids, guys, because like the meaning of the name, it doesn't always work out, and that's a story in itself. But a lot of times a person's name can kind of reflect what kind of person they're going to be. And for people in my culture, most of us, I didn't get one of those names, but from my people, it is recommended that you name your child with a Yah at the end, which is for God, or some name that's from this book, to name your child something that is from this book, but preferably something with a Yah at the end that is kind of commemorating God. In some way that it's going to be a blessing to your child to carry that type of name. But that's not always the case. I mean, I have a name that means beautiful rose. And it's not here in this book, It's a good name, though. It's a very sweet name. I like it. But, it'd be cool to also have had a name from this book somewhere. I've met so many people that had really cool names. Like there was a woman that I met a few years ago. Her name was Bethlehem. I thought that was one of the coolest names I ever heard. And I ended up naming a character in my book after her because I just thought it was, and, her nickname was Beth. It was just so cute and so sweet, and I just thought it was a wonderful name. But yeah, back to him renaming the child Son of Good Fortune, which in a way it kind of plays itself out a little bit, his name, later on a little bit. I don't want to spoil it though. I guess we're getting there. We're in 35, so we've got about 15 more chapters to go before this book is complete. And you're going to hear more from Benjamin, obviously. But it looks like Jacob has a concubine. It doesn't really say how long he's had it. Like maybe he's had it even when he had his 2 wives and 2 maidservants and that big old mess. Maybe he also had a concubine. I don't know. Who knows how many he had? I don't know. I just think that type of stuff is gross, personally. I'm just not a big fan of sexual immorality, and God isn't either. He just says that that's like such a violation to your body. But, yeah, like he had a lot of kids. He had 12 sons, and then he also had, that was mentioned, his daughter Dinah, so that's 13 kids at least that he's had. Who knows, maybe he's had more. But we're focusing on the 12 sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So this is the 12 tribes of Israel coming into formation. This is where it comes from. It's the children of Jacob, who has been renamed again, like Israel. He was renamed already when he wrestled that man before meeting his brother Esau a couple chapters ago. But now it's been reiterated by God, like himself. Like, I mean, apparently the man he was wrestling was God, Jesus. But God is also reiterating it here, saying, your name's no longer Jacob, your name is Israel. And you can see it kind of switching up between Jacob and Israel after that in the following verses. But these are the tribes of Israel. And I want to find one more thing before I kind of let this chapter go. God wrestler is what Israel means. God wrestler. So they're talking about a particular type of people that don't, it sounds to me like it kind of foreshadows like what these people are like. They're stiff-necked and hard-headed, They'll wrestle with God. Not always for a blessing, but just to have their own way sometimes, or to be like the rest of the people in the world that are of the world, living of the flesh. You'll see a lot of that happening in this book. The people of Israel, the tribes, and just the countless, as the sand on the shore, or the stars in the sky, all of that. These people in particular, and if you want to know who they are today, you can research. You'll find out. But these people in particular, they definitely are God wrestlers. They acknowledge God. They always know God. These people, they always know God, even when nobody else acknowledges them. They always acknowledge God, even when like certain things happen, like slavery and everything, several times it happens. They never forget God. They never forget. The children never forget. It's just a part of their lifestyle. Is you're born and your family is talking about God, But they also are human, and even though they're this great representation, they have blunders, and selfish times, selfish seasons that upsets God. We'll put it that way. So it's very interesting, God wrestler. I think also it originally came from Israel or Jacob wrestling God, in that morning time or whatever before he went to meet with his brother Esau. He was wrestling and was like, I'm not going to leave you alone until you bless me. And I think that's the main reason why it's called God wrestler. But it's really interesting that the people in general are God wrestlers. Maybe not with the same exact amount of passion or the heart that Jacob had that day, but for sure the people of Israel, Israelites, Hebrews, Jews, whatever you want to call them, there is a back and forth of, and not between God, he stays the same the whole time, but with the people. They basically have a time of like on and off with God because they're caught up in the world and, want to have things that people in the world have because apparently it seems like it's so great and it's not. And I think really any of us can relate to that. You're walking with God. Sometimes you do want to just do something that's like of this world because the world tells you it's harmless, or maybe it just seems fun, or like they're having a better time, or while you're carrying your cross on the narrow path. But it's not. Oh gosh, I mean, if you can avoid a lot of this stuff, do so, because it's an illusion. It really is. And I haven't really partaken in much things in the world per se, but the things that I have partaken in, it was never satisfying. Like, it just kind of gave you like a moment, like when you first experience it, maybe that first instance is kind of cool, but it quickly fades. It's like, it reminds me of like, I'm not even going to get into that. This is another story for another day. I'm rambling on. It's already been like 30 something minutes. These are the things that stood out to me. And, his father died. Isaac died at 180 years old. A lot of people are dying here. That meant a lot to him. And it looks like he's had a reunion with his brother to bury him. And I'm kind of wondering what happened to Rebecca. She's not mentioned here. Isaac died, which is really interesting too, because this was decades ago that they were thinking that he was going to die when he was all old and blind, mostly blind. And decades went on. He still had more life. So God was sustaining him all that time to make sure maybe that Jacob, when he came back, he could see him again. So really, really interesting. I'm saying that about everything apparently, but I guess it's good to keep this in mind. It says also in, I don't even know what's going on here, but it says in verse 22, and it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. So he heard it. I'm going to take it literally. Reuben, his firstborn, was getting down with his father's concubine, and Israel, aka Jacob, he heard it. He actually physically heard that, which is oh gosh. So I don't really know exactly why a son would do that. I think that's pretty gross, but to be honest, I'm not mad at Reuben. Like, he doesn't really have a very good example on, staying away from sexual immorality. I mean, his father has like 4 or 5 different chicks at least that he's had kids with, and so I don't know what else to tell you. It's really out there. You can't really expect your kids to do better if you're not holding a good example, to them. So, as gross as it was what he did, look at what he's got to look up to. He doesn't have like a father with just one wife that was loyal to that wife and, all of that, because had he done that, then, of course the firstborn son wouldn't be sleeping with his mother, but that's not the case. The firstborn son is sleeping with a concubine. I mean, what the heck? Why do you have a concubine? That's gross. You're utilizing a woman for sexual gratification. That's gross, because that person is also a creation of God, and she matters. She's not some sexual outlet. That's disgusting. I don't like that stuff. So, I mean, you can obviously hear me saying that in other chapters, but I don't like those things. I just think that's really grotesque. I don't really engage in that type of stuff, like, at all. It's just not my thing, ever. People who do that, like if there was a guy trying to talk to me and he had a history like that, probably I wouldn't want to know him in that way. I wouldn't be interested. I mean, I think it would be more impressive for me if a man, I don't know, had some more self-love and respect to preserve himself. Have some inner strength there, some restraint, some control. To me, I'm not going to get too deep into that because I know like that's maybe a controversial thing. And in today's society, people they just do that so freely, in any form too. Like, oh my Lord, I don't know. I just don't mess with that. And I recommend that you don't either unless you're married, and I mean like a real marriage. So I'm not going to get too much deeper into that. I'm going to close out this chapter here. The reason I brought that up was not to talk about the immorality part of it, because I don't blame Reuben necessarily. It's gross, but I mean, his father was a bad example, so I don't know why he was upset. On top of that, this is kind of important because it's going to come up later, and maybe I shouldn't say that, but I think it's important to note that, it wasn't just this. Nothing in this book is mentioned, out of the blue for no reason. There's a reason why they said that. So just keep that, in your mind, not the actual activity, but just the action that had occurred. And that's it. I'm not going to say too much more about this chapter. It was a very interesting chapter. I keep saying interesting. I need to find another adjective. But it is. And a lot of people passed away that were important to him. So he's doing a lot of grieving. And yeah, it's just a lot going on there. He's reunited. God's walking with him, and he is Israel now. And there's a big focus on his sons as well, which they are very important, and we're going to find out more about them probably in the next chapter. So I look forward to reading that with you guys. Please leave comments below if anything stood out to you, or really you have anything to say about the chapter. Maybe it's helped you in some way, or help you reflect on your own life. Most of these things that I read about in this book, maybe it isn't meant for that, but I think it is in some way. I mean, these are stories and these are books about individuals. Some of these books are actually named after individuals, and I think it's a part of their book, like the books that God keeps on each and every one of us. There's a book with my name on it up there where God is documenting everything that I do. There's a book with everybody, an individual book with everybody's name that God records it, and it's the worst when you think that you're doing something that nobody knows, because God sees everything. He's recording it, so be careful. When you think that you're getting away with stuff, you're not getting away with anything. Be careful. Try to live as honest as you can. And if that's a struggle, probably you're going to need to dig a little deeper, but I'm not here to judge you guys. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. I look forward to reading chapter 36 with you guys later, and I hope you have a really blessed day. I appreciate you stopping by and reading with me, and I pray that you take something real special for you to apply to your own life in this book, in this chapter. All right, guys, I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.